Hello dear chess friends, welcome to our new video. Here we will analyze some famous game Tigran Petrosian played against Wolfgang UNZICKER. He's convincingly won that game with white pieces. Game was played in nation match Soviet Union against Eastern Germany. Game was played in 1960 and Petrosian started with d4. Well, game is very important from a methodical and theoretical point of view to explain some things can happen if black does not threat precisely this opponent. Well, story goes about Queen's Gambit and declined one. So with some strange move order, game transposed to Queen's Gambit, c6. Black wants to go for Carlsbad pawn structure after c6. Queen c2. Before white plays knight to c3, avoiding some pin, he wants to activate the queen, delaying activation of knight b1, and that's why after castling right now he played knight c3. h6, very useful move to determine position of white bishop, and Petrosian moves bishop back to f4. Well, that bishop has very important control over that long diagonal. Knight b7 followed, and of course very important moment before knight goes to bd7, before knight b goes to d7, it would be bad for white to take on c takes d, because black can answer c takes d and knight can go to c6. Very famous recipe, very well known approach even from advanced variation of French defense. So perhaps you already know, in advanced variation of French defense, black waits for knight bd to move, then to take c takes d4. Here, after c takes d, black can continue e takes d, but that would lead us to a bit different position. Knight d5, however, would be probably better, where after bishop g3, queen a5, black is, let's say, okay. But c takes d was played, and now knight bd7 causes some disharmony in black army, because, you know, with knight on d7 there are some problems, but cannot easily activate bishop c8 and thus rook from a8. Bishop d3, white finishes development, and after a6 castling, black played b5. That is first a moment in our game. One may ask, why did Petrosian allow the opponent to play b5 to gain space on the queen side? Was he able to play a4? Yeah, but then black have very fine maneuver, knight b8, and knight regroups after that, retreating to c6 and b4 to occupy that weakened spot. So Petrosian perfectly played castling, and after b5, a4. That is just excellent decision, practically forcing black to make some weak squares on the queen side by playing b4. There is nothing better. Knight a2, very important, and of course white could play even this with knight d2 and b3, but knight a2 is better, because after knight a2 you go to b3, same time delivering attack to that pawn b4, and same time you keep possibility to play other knight to d2 if needed. So after knight a2, knight e8, white continue with knight c1. Before rook comes to c1, white wants to transfer knight to b3, of course. a5, that pawn sooner or later will need protection, and knight b3. Now we see the point of white excellent move a4. That point is evident. That move practically brought a lot to white. White controls c-file. He has access now to square b5 and also very important square c6. And there is permanent pressure on exposed pawn a5 with domination on c-file. And no wonder such fine strategician as Petrosian was almost easily converted that long-lasted advantage. So black practically decided to play bishop a6. Of course, bishop b7 may be better to control c6, but okay, that square, that bishop on b7 is on some bad spot, not participating in the game, and it's reasonable to go for exchanging passive piece for opponent's active piece, with bishop a6 this time. Okay, white has nothing against exchange, and queen d3. Very important, removing queen from the file. White wants to double, and maybe even triple, you'll see, with getting time to attack the rook. Now, rook bc6 is not possible, because after queen b5 there is double attack on the pawn a5 and rook c6. So black plays rook a7 with idea to play queen a8 if possible, if needed. Okay, Petrosian occupies the file, and knight d6. If black plays bishop d6 instead, okay, there is perfect continuation, rook c6. Black may take, but okay, white has no problems about that damaged pawn structure in the center, and very important, black cannot play knight d6, which would be maybe good for him. So after knight d6, now we must stop for a moment, and I suggest you to pause video to find plan for white. Okay, here I will give explanation. White just took that knight, and white to give away that beautiful bishop on f4, controlling that long diagonal for that knight cannot jump anywhere. Well, the point is, it's not problem if you give good piece for good piece. You should count remaining piece on the board. Don't take care about pieces which will be gone. So after bishop d6, let's compare minor pieces, and we'll see that white minor pieces are absolutely dominant. Bishop d6 controls nothing, attacks nothing, prevents nothing, is perfectly restricted by white pawns if white plays, for instance, g3, f4 on the king side, and does not prevent white infiltration, which will be done on light squares. Rook c6, knight b8, okay, now knight is passive and rook goes back. Knight d7, white got a tempo, okay, no problem. So let's double. Knight b6 and queen b5. There is no any attack on the b file. White same time protects pawn a4, attacking knight on b6 and threatening rook c6 with double attack. Rook c4, black closes the file, but that is just for a moment. Knight d2, taking, queen a8, next moves are more or less natural. Rook d8, white invades, nothing special happens still. g6 making space for the king, white does the same. King g7. And now we must stop for a moment. White advantage got tremendous, and all white pieces are ultimately active, and black's army forced to wait for an execution. But still nothing direct is visible for white. In positions, all pieces are on best places. You should go for some pawn play. Petrosian was a real master of preparing activities and perfectly understood above mentioned state. But how to organize pawn play here? Well, the only possibility for pawn play is to advance pawns, of course, on the king side, but that can be connected with weakening position of white king. Weakening position of white king maybe will give opponent some chance for some counterplay. And of course, as you can see, Petrosian sets scene for one of all time his favorite approaches, evacuation of the king with launching pawn attack afterwards. And now you can be witness, you will see one of the most beautiful maneuvers ever played on the chessboard. Petrosian played king f1. As you can see, dear chess friends, white does not have anything concrete on the queen side, but same time black cannot do anything bringing him any relief on the queen side. Moving rook a7, moving queen a8 is not possible because pawn a5 will fall. There is No move from rook d8 protecting the bishop, only bishop can do some waiting moves. And after king f1, h4, h5, rook c2, don't rush. White wants just to evacuate king to a2 or maybe b1. And look, after black waiting moves and white evacuation, so now white king is safe, and white predicts he will decide game on the king side. Why to complicate? Why to go for playing on the king side if you can face any risk after you weaken position of your king? Move king to queen side, it will be perfectly safe there, and then strike on the king side. Queen e2, queen b7, rook c1, maybe white wants to play queen c2, controlling light squares, king g7, but of course queen b5. One of very important Petrosian principles he adopted from great Akiba Rubinstein is don't rush. By patiently playing, you set some psychological pressure on the opponent and you put some trap to your opponent. So if you want to play with some pawns, if you want to go for some pawn play, think once again, maybe you can do something with your pieces to delay action, to delay pawn action. For a moment you will have your pieces perfectly placed on the board. So queen b5. So white tries to exchange queens. Who knows, maybe black will allow mistake by trading. So try that. You lose nothing. After ab, for instance, there is b6, for instance rook a d7, and after knight a5 black is just lost. I will show that variation. Rook a8, and now this leads to devastating position. So not rook c8 because there is rook d8, but knight c6, and now after that pawn b4 falls. White will take on a3 with an easy win. So that's why black must refute exchanging the queens. Black must play queen a8 and f4. Now f5 blocks position on the queen side, but that would be horrible because white will play rook b6. There is no way for black to avoid rook 1 to c6 with destroying, with humiliation on the 6th rank. Black will lose pawn e6, black will lose then pawn g6 with a terrible defeat. So black must wait for an execution. He plays king h7, queen e2, queen b7, and white goes for final strike. Finally opening position on the queen side, and black is completely lost. H takes, queen takes, queen h7, and after queen e7, h5. Black managed to survive. Black managed to delay imminent resignation with transferring queen there, and now white plays just king a2. Idea is clear. White does not want to allow opponent queen f5. There is no doubt after queen a5 black is still lost, but white wants to win the game with queens on the board. Why? Because he attacks an opponent king. He who attacks an opponent king, he who has safer king, should keep queens on the board. After king a2, king g7, h takes, queen h4. Attacking the rook. Rook h8, queen f2 gives nothing. Rook must go back to defend the bishop. So let's see what happened in the game. After queen g6, queen h4, bishop e7, queen f2, king f8. And now white has possibility to play absolutely amazing move, queen h2. The point is to threat queen h8 in some moment, or also to threat to open that diagonal with f5. But that will take place a bit later. White played knight d2 and knight b3, and now queen h2. Idea is to penetrate via h8 or to play f5 in some moment. You'll see bishop f6, rook c8. Here, if black captures, okay, that would be beautiful mate. After queen h8, black must go to e7 and f5, as I told you, where after queen f5 there is double attack. White threats with rook e8, white attacks the rook, and game would be over. So after rook a d7, still white has crushing move, that is knight c5. Now unfortunately for black, after rook c8 white takes with check and pawn c8 will fall. And if black plays something like b3, okay, white just takes with a king. Rook d6. f5 key move, you know, there is threat of queen d6. For instance, that may take place, white wins. Black decided to go for check, rook b6, and after king a2, black resigned. So that was a really terrible defeat, and black was without being able to fire even one single bullet. I want to once again pay attention on some important moment, and I will choose the moment white started with evacuation of the king f1. In positions, your opponent is hopeless, your opponent is paralyzed, and you dominate on the board without evident plan. It is very important to play patiently, but playing patiently, you can get serious benefits. For instance, you can practically confuse your opponent. Maybe he will go for some unexpected and crazy action which would just help you to convert easier. Also, maybe you will make your opponent asleep. So if you go for some slow moves and then you go for some active move, by changing a rhythm, by playing in some portions, of course, you can maybe make your opponent asleep, and maybe he just won't be able to react on your direct strike in some good moment. And of course, if you want to go for decisive pawn play, it is good to evacuate the king. So now even the king helps to white. Without transferring king to queen side, it's questionable if white would be able to win the game after direct attack with pawns on the king side. Dear chess friends, that was a real masterpiece created by Iron Tigran, one of the best players of all times, of course. He was a real master of Queen's Gambit positions and structures, and I highly recommend to you, if you want properly to learn that opening, learn that from games of Iron Tigran. You will see how to handle that position, and by analyzing his games, you will see the most important and most instructive ideas, and you will know to understand various types of pawn structures can arise from that opening. Once again, I hope you enjoy our video and hope you will enjoy in our future videos. See you soon with new games. Bye bye.